One of Keir Starmer's last acts as Prime Minister was to make an apology on behalf of the British state to women who were victim to forced adoptions. This was the practice predominant in Britain between 1949 and 1976 of coercing or pressuring young or unmarried women to give up their newborn babies for adoption. 185,000 babies were taken from unmarried mothers in England and Wales and placed for adoption through a system in which the state, churches and adoption agencies coerced and shamed young women, many of them teenagers, into giving up their children. Mothers were hidden away in mother and baby homes, denied information about welfare support that would have let them keep babies, and in some cases never allowed to hold them. Now, I have to admit, this was a story that passed me by when it happened a fortnight ago. There's been a lot of breaking news of late, and sort of apologies by politicians for historic injustices can be all too easy to dismiss as theatre. What I hadn't realised, though, was that this is a scandal that directly affects a key member of the Novara Live team. Now, that's because the mother of one of our long-time producers, Darius, was herself an adoptee whose biological mother was coerced into giving her up for adoption. Debbie Iromlou, as well as being Darius's mum, is co-founder of the Adult Adoptee movement, and her testimony about her experience as a forced adoptee was referenced by Keir Starmer in his speech to Parliament on the adoption scandal. I spoke to Debbie earlier today and began by asking her to outline how she came to be a forced adoptee.
My birth mother came from Kuwait, and she came over to London when she was pregnant with me. She went to visit her doctor at Harley Street and said that her life would be in danger, and she'd be at threat of an honour killing if her family found out that she was pregnant and she'd had a baby out of wedlock. So the doctor suggested adoption and put her in touch with a private adoption agency.
Sort of the standard case is where someone was pressured to give up their baby for adoption by the NHS or by the Church of England, maybe because they were young or because they were out of wedlock. And so there's been this long campaign for justice. Yours is a bit more complicated as a story. So sort of talk to me about where you feel you were failed and where your mum was failed by the British state.
Well, I was born in 1968, so slap bang in the middle kind of the whole forced adoption era. And the private agency that was then at the time called the Centre for Memorial Help for Babies, then became the Phyllis Holman Richards Adoption Society, was involved in a lot of adoptions from that era. And my mother just happened to be one of them, in the sense of the only option that they gave her was that I had to be placed into foster care and that she had to sign to agree to get me released. And I don't think I particularly had the right quality, or should I say duty of care, simply because I was seen as the baby of a foreign national.
And talk to me about what happened to you, because I know sort of you got in contact with your birth mother later in life, but let's begin with sort of your childhood. So your mother was pressured to sign documents,
yes,
putting you into care essentially.
Yes.
So what happened next in your life?
So I was placed in foster care for the first 2 months with a temporary carer. And then I was placed in long-term foster care with a single mother in Suffolk who was living on a council estate, and she was barred from fostering or adopting children by social services. And social services at the time had said that I shouldn't be placed with her, but the agency ignored it, and social services then went on to ignore their own advice, and I was left there. The bizarre factor of my case is that even though I'm classed as a transracial adoptee, i.e. I'm a non-white person, I was raised by a white mother to believe that I was actually biracial. And that she was my biological mother. And it was only when I turned 16 and social services were worrying about me aging out in the system that they forced her into adopting me legally. And that's when the true knowledge of my birth parentage came through. And I found out that actually, you know, I'm not her biological daughter, and that my birth parents came from Kuwait and Iran.
And just to clarify, I mean, you said that your adopted mother, or the mother who adopted you, or the woman who adopted you, sorry, just to get my terminology correct, she was barred from adopting or fostering.
Yes.
I mean, what was that about, and what was she like as your carer, or your foster mother, or your adopted mother?
Well, she, as an adopted mother, she had a lot of issues, mental health issues, and that was the main concern about her in general. She wasn't a fit carer. And so being the child of somebody who was like that was extremely difficult. So I kind of learned to become very self-sufficient throughout my childhood because I wasn't being given the care that was supposed to be afforded me.
And when you discovered that you were adopted, I know you went on, basically a very long and difficult quest to find your birth mother. Could you talk about that?
Yeah. So from the age of 16 right through to the age of 24, I was searching for my birth mother. And I went to the adoption agency to ask for my file, and they refused to show me any information. They refused to show me a file, basically. And they told me that I shouldn't search for her, that I would put her life in danger. I should think about her and just get on with my life. And there was a reason why she gave me up. She didn't want me. She won't want me, and to forget about her. And I found that it was quite dismissive. They didn't seem to care about my feelings, about who I was and where I came from, and the need to know the truth about my origins. I then went back again at the age of 18, and they still refused to show me any documentation. So all I did have was basically a birth certificate with her name on it. So I had to use that. I went to the embassy. They refused to help me because of the scandal that it might cause. And so to cut a long story short, in those 8 years, it took, after the Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and I saw the images of the tanks crossing the border into Kuwait, I became terrified of the fact that my own mother would die before I had a chance to meet her. So it kind of gave me a real urgency. And it wasn't until I started meeting up with other adoptees and being at workshops and gaining some community with them that I discovered that one of them was going to Kuwait on a job after the war to rebuild the country. And she made inquiries about my mother. I was able to get a phone number through her of cousins, and then through the cousins I called around and eventually got the phone number of my own mother and spoke to her, and that's how we finally became reunited.
That sounds like it would have been an incredibly emotional experience. What happened then? What did your mum say? And I suppose especially what did she say about the circumstances in which she was pressured or coerced to give you up as a baby?
She was really deeply traumatized by the fact that she'd given me up. She said that she'd never forgotten about me. She thought about me every single day, especially on my birthday. She said that when she'd left me at the hospital, she always looked in, when she walked up and down Oxford Street as a tourist, that she would look into prams wondering if I'm one of those babies. So she was still traumatized. And I think that my appearance in her life at the age of 24 re-traumatized her. But she felt deeply ashamed and guilty for what she'd done to me, and it never left her. And that was very difficult because I was also very traumatized and very angry at the same time. And I thought that I could possibly, we see these images, don't we, on Long Lost Family of, oh my goodness, we're reunited and everything's hunky-dory and we skip off into the sunset. And it's not like that in reality, because you're strangers, you're relative strangers, and it's a process, and you have to work hard at getting to know each other and to try and work through the trauma together.
And so did you continue to have a relationship with your birth mother after finding her?
I did continue to have a relationship with her for 5 years until she died quite suddenly. So, yeah, I felt abandoned all over again.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I suppose let's talk about the events of the past couple of weeks. Keir Starmer made an apology. I know people have been campaigning for a very long time for there to be an official apology from the state for the failures it had made in this crisis, either because the coercion was by institutions in their control, so the NHS or the social services, or because the regulation failed to set the right guidelines for these private adoption agencies, which has affected you so severely. How much did that apology mean to you?
As a community of adoptees, it meant a great deal because we were acknowledged. We felt vindicated because for so long, talk of apologies has been directed towards the birth mothers only, and no one's really officially recognised the trauma involved in being an adoptee and the lifelong losses that we live with. But for me personally, it was very emotional, because to be named by the Prime Minister and apologized to directly had great meaning for me. It helped to lift the shame that I've lived with all of my life, because I've had so many doors closed in my face and nobody's ever apologized to me, not even the people who should do, my adoptive mother and my birth mother included. So to hear it on such a high level has meant so much to me personally as well.
And you're a co-founder of an organisation called Adult Adoptee Movement. Could you talk to me about that? And I suppose, what do you campaign for? What does the Adult Adoptee Movement do?
So the Adult Adoptee Movement was formed as a result of the JCHR inquiry back in 2022, a look into the historical practices of forced adoption. And we've been campaigning really for acknowledgement of our own trauma and an apology for the state's harm of what they've done to us, what it has done to us. We have lost any connection to our biological family. We have to fight for the rights to gain access to our own adoption information, which is held in files and locked away. We have to go through dehumanizing situations where we're having to beg for information and have to wait up to 2 years to see a social worker who then decides what information we're allowed to see and what needs to be redacted from our files. It means a lot in the sense of we've been campaigning for the right of access to our own biological medical history, because when you become adopted, your NHS number is changed, so you're completely cut off. For me personally, as an inter-country adoptee, I wasn't so affected by that because there wouldn't be any medical information on record of my birth family, but there will be for the thousands of adoptees that are British citizens and live here, and they're not allowed to access that. So we're walking around in genetic bewilderment. So we've worked hard to be acknowledged, and we realise that apology alone is not enough. So that, you know, there needs to be mitigations attached, and that's what we continue to fight for the services that we deserve.
And sort of the deeply unjust experience that you've been through, that you've lived through, are you confident that, I mean, obviously the exact same thing wouldn't happen again, and the Church of England, the state, they've all sort of apologised for the practice of coercing mothers into giving up their children. But do you feel comfortable that the system now is as it should be, or are there still sort of problems in the adoption system that we should know about?
Yes, there are. I'm not comfortable with present-day adoption because actually forced adoption is not just historic. It's happening today. Babies are being removed from mothers at birth in hospital wards. Babies are being removed from mothers who are suffering domestic abuse, domestic violence. Rather than help the woman, shelter the woman, take the woman and her child into safety, they remove a child from that woman. And she's already going through the trauma of being abused by a partner, and then you're adding to that by removing her child from her. And, you know, we're seeing it happen today with not just domestic abuse, we're seeing it happening with birth mothers who have mental health issues, or birth mothers who simply can't afford because of the class or the system that they're living in doesn't allow them to provide for their child. So they're obviously watched by social services. So forced adoption is very much happening today, and I really like to shine a light onto it. And I hope to be able to do that in the coming years.
And what about care for the adopted children? So I know that sort of the injustice in your life partly relates to the fact that your mother was pressured and coerced to give you, your birth mother was coerced and pressured to give you up. But then also, when you entered the care system, you were not dealt the care that you deserved to quite extreme degrees. I mean, being placed with someone who should have been banned, or, you know, had been banned from adopting people, that's really outrageous. What's your perspective on how children in the care system are currently treated by the state and its institutions? They're being failed, quite frankly. They're being failed. Children are being separated when they're placed into care. Sibling groups are being separated. They're not, you know, people are not really caring as much. The caring profession is meant to be that, but sometimes what we find with the caring profession is they're the most uncaring of people, and children are leaving the system without any support.
without any knowledge of how to live an everyday life. And quite frankly, it's outrageous to me that so many people who leave the care system as a result of the lack of care that they've experienced take their own lives even.
Debbie Iromlou, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your insights into the system as it was and as it is now. Also, thank you for raising Darius, who's been an absolute sort of stellar addition to the Novara Media team. So we appreciate you for that.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
That was Debbie Iromlou, an amazing woman, speaking to me earlier today.